Very kind introduction, thank you. How you guys doing?
Great. How are you?
That was nice. Who said that? No one ever says that back. You know, that was actually pretty good for a university that does not sell caffeine on campus. Like this late in the afternoon, that was impressive. First of all, I apologize for the shirt. For all of you insensitive people who wore red, and you know who you are. I see all of you. This is a Traeger shirt, and I didn't remember that I was speaking here until I got to the office and looked at my calendar. And so I definitely would have worn a blue Traeger shirt because I feel the pain that all of you feel, but life goes on. There will be a chance next year. 8 is not coming. I live a mile from Rice Eccles. I married a Ute. We have created 6 wonderful children. The oldest is 9 years old. And I will tell you, the last decade, 12 years, 13 years of my life have been an unbelievable ride that I never, ever would have scripted. I like it. It's been fun. It's been high adrenaline. I'm constantly trying to keep up and balance and prioritize. But it's been a high energy ride, and it's been a ton of fun. I'm going to tell you a little about the story. What time do we finish here?
We finish at 4:20.
4:20. Okay.
There's the question and answer.
So we save the Q&A until we get up there. These are all questions I might have asked before I got up to speak. I'm going to tell you this story, and honestly, for a guy who sat in your seat not that long ago, the intent is less about the story, and it's more about you envisioning what your careers may become. And careers, if you that's a formal word. What I do I don't really think about it anymore as a career. I'm less strategic, and I'm just much more driven by the passion of building a business. And so as you sit where you are, think about what this means for you. Because the stories come and go, and the applicability to who you are and the vision for what you may build is what matters the most. And I will tell you that I do exactly what I wanted to do when I sat in your seat. But it didn't start there. There was a lot of trial and error. There was a lot of chasing opportunities that were hard, that were painful, grinding, sticking to it, meandering, finding things that got closer and closer to what I wanted to do and who I wanted to become professionally. And so I'm going to tell you a little about that story, and I'd be glad to take questions upstairs afterward, I guess. So first of all, let me tell you how things evolved early in my career. I was at BYU, and I thought I wanted to be a management consultant. Who here thinks they want to become a management consultant? Enjoy that. You know what? Look, there's someone for everyone. And the reality is, it's a great place to start. I learned a ton from it. But what I always wanted to be was an entrepreneur. Who here thinks they want to become an entrepreneur? A lot more hands. Tell me why. Why do you want to become an entrepreneur? Good chat. Good chat. There we go.
I want to build something from the ground up.
You want to
Start it from the bottom and go.
You want to build something from the ground up, start it, and go. Why?
That motivates me. I love seeing things build, whether it's people or an idea. But I love seeing where it was and seeing the progression that it made.
Yeah. Makes a ton of sense. It's an amazing experience. Go ahead.
I want to create something that's bigger than me that allows a company organization to serve more people than I can imagine.
Okay. How does it become bigger than you? What does that mean?
Because when you're one person, you've got a limited amount of resources, time, and you still will with an organization, but when you've got more people on a large scale.
Yes. Yeah, look, I remember when I was between Skullcandy and Trager thinking about what was next. and reading Clayton Christensen's book, How Will I Measure My Life? And he makes this comment that management is a noble profession. And it's noble because of the impact that it has on people. Not just creating jobs and paying and sort of paying basic necessities, but good managers have a positive impact that goes well beyond the walls of their office and the people that they provide that service to. Go ahead.
We learned in our marketing class just that the majority of people aren't really naturally fraudulent or naturally honest. They kind of sway towards how their leaders are. So I want to build something to where the leadership persuades the majority of the business to be honest.
It's awesome. I mean, I am naturally honest, but I see where you're going with it. It is really interesting to see how culture starts from the top and how organizations are willing to adopt the culture of their leader. Super important. Last one. Go ahead.
I don't want to have a boss.
You don't want to have a boss. We'll enjoy that. That'd be nice, right? So it's part of the reason you become an entrepreneur. Now, what you learn over time is that your boss is your customer. You know, if you build it, you are accountable to your end consumer, your customer, to building something that's really meaningful to them. I don't have a boss, but we just brought in a bunch of money from a financial partner, and I have a partner. And I would agree that being an entrepreneur is way better than getting a job. So I quit a perfectly good job in March of 2005, when you guys were all in elementary school. And I got in my Ford Explorer. I left my college furniture in my apartment in San Francisco, and I started driving east on the 80 to my parents' basement in Park City. And I did it for a lot of the reasons that you guys have said. I wanted to build something meaningful. I wanted it to be my own. I wanted to build something that was not only meaningful to consumers, but meaningful to people that had positive influence on them. And I landed in Park City. I showed up at my office. Day one, I realized that I really didn't know how to be an entrepreneur. I mean, I had tried things in the past, but being an entrepreneur is learning. You learn all of the theory that you can learn, but the pattern recognition that you develop on the job, building something, is irreplaceable. There is no textbook that can teach you that. And so, I remember just how crazy my first week was. Day one, I show up at my Skullcandy office, which is tiny, and I asked Rick Alden, who became my co-founder, "Where's my office?" And he said, "Well, we got a little closet over here. Why don't you set up in the closet?" And he said, "Okay, no problem. I just came from a great office in San Francisco." Walked in, it was full of boxes, and I said, "Hey, where can I get a desk?" He said, "Well, go down to Staples, pick yourself up a desk. Why don't you get a laptop while you're at it? Why don't you buy a chair?" And he said, "Great, sounds like this is what being an entrepreneur is all about. Do you have a company card or anything?" He's like, No, we're a little underfunded right now. Do you have a credit card?" And I said, "You are underfunded." And so, fortunately, I did have a credit card. I went to Staples. I bought some stuff for the office. I built it. And I got paid back for that about 2 years later. That's how long it took to cash in, to get cash from my expense reimbursement. Day two comes along. I show up at the office, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed. It's 7:30 in the morning. No one's there. I don't have a key. I'm waiting outside. 8:30, 9:30. And I think, wow, what company did I just join? So I call Rick. And I say, "Hey, Rick, it's Jeremy. I work for you. It's my second day. I'm at the office. No one's here." And there are only 3 guys that come in. And he says, "Dude, look out the window. It's a powder day." I said, "Awesome." So this company doesn't work on powder days, which I later learned is really cool. And it was actually really important to the culture that we were building. Skullcandy. Day number 3, no issues on day 3. Everything was just like perfectly smooth. I'm sure that's not the case, but that's my recollection. Day 4, Thursday morning. Rick comes to my office about 11 o'clock, puts his head down, he's kind of scratching his head, and he said, "Oh, Jeremy, I have an issue." And I'm like, "Day 4 on the job, I can solve anything." "What's the problem, Rick?" And he said, "Well, we're out of money." Not surprising, you couldn't afford my desk. We're out of money. He said, "I need 30 grand by tomorrow, or I'm going to miss payroll, and we can't pay our factory in China, and they'll stop shipping our stuff." And I don't know if I really wanted to invest that $30,000 in Skullcandy at the time, but I didn't want to fail on my 4th day on the job. And so I took the 30 grand that had taken me some time to save, took it out of my account, put it in the business, and so went my experience at Skullcandy. And I can tell you 8 years of insane, chaotic stories like that. Being an entrepreneur is a trip. And so if you think you want to be an entrepreneur, by the way, I fully endorse that my life has changed for having become an entrepreneur. There are certain people that really thrive in that environment, and there are others that kind of go crazy. They need more structure, they need the guaranteed paycheck, and you'll figure out over time if it's what you really want to do. But the only way you figure it out is by actually trying it. And everyone asks, well, what's the right time to be an entrepreneur? It's different. It's like giving relationship advice. There's no upside. You figure it out, right? You figure those things out as you do it. So I'm not going to focus as much on Skullcandy because that is a distant memory for me. I've spent the last 4 years building a wood pellet grill business. And I want to talk about something that's very specific to this business that we've built. First of all, who here has heard of Traeger? Awesome. Wow. Our VP of Marketing must be doing a good job. Who here had heard of Traeger 5 years ago? It's awesome. That makes me feel so good. We're making progress. Let's see. I'm just going to start this video. Just hit that. All right. Look, we're going to wake y'all up a little bit more. Get a little Jay-Z going on BYU campus. I promise it's the clean version. Okay, for those of you who know Jay-Z, you now know that was not Jay-Z. That was a different video than I remember was in here. But I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. That is not your ordinary grill brand, right? That is not, if anyone knows anything about Weber or Charbroil or Brinkman or Big Green Egg, that's a very different brand. And although I'm not going to talk about brand strategy or company positioning, the most important thing I learned about building a business is that if you do not look noticeably different than the other people out there, it's really hard to win. It's hard to build something special. So disrupting is key. We have a disruptive product solution, and we have a disruptive brand because we're looking to disrupt a very big, very boring, very stale industry that just doesn't have a lot of energy. That's actually, that is a topic in and of itself. I want to focus more today on how culture, how the environment that you work in drives success, how it creates outcomes. And you can look at this from different perspectives. If you're a CEO, you can think about how you build a culture with the right type of people so that you can win. As someone who's sitting in your seat, the other way you can think about it, if you're not going to be an entrepreneur out of the gate, is finding the culture that makes you your best self. Because I will tell you, and I promise that there is a difference. When we find ourselves in environments that inspire us to do great things, they give us the tools, they motivate us, they create an atmosphere where you just walk in, you feel energy, and you want to do great things. We are so much better than we walk in other environments. If you've ever walked in, has anyone ever had an internship and shown up to the office and felt bored? Why did you feel bored? Anyone that had a hand up?
I got there and there wasn't much like, hi, who are you? Like, they didn't get to know me at all. They just sat me down and said, all right, well, track these things and we'll talk to you in an hour or so. And I was like, all right.
Sounds awesome, right? Like no real investment in you. It's, hey, go do some work for us. Probably not incredibly thought-provoking work. You know, there's this cliche phrase, I was just a number. And that's about organizations that don't really inspire their people. If you get bored in a place, are you going to do your best work? If people don't give you meaningful things to do, if they don't take some risk on you as a person, are you going to succeed? The chances are low. And yet when you walk in most companies, I'm convinced, from my days as a management consultant and as I talk to people that are early in their career, most companies don't create environments that are motivating. And that matters. If you want to be great, don't go to a place where you feel zapped of your energy when you walk in. Traeger's an interesting story. This is an interesting case study of how this works. First of all, Traeger was built 30 years ago by a guy named Joe Traeger in Oregon. It's a magical product. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard people say, my Traeger is the best product I've ever owned. Not the best grill, the best product. I remember when I was doing due diligence on this brand, I was 26 years old. I had never heard of it. And by the way, almost no one raised their hand for having heard of this brand 5 years ago. I certainly hadn't. But I went to Oregon and I started talking to Traeger consumers. And I would say, hey, what do you think of Traeger? Trying to decide if I wanted to invest in and buy this business with my financial partner. And the response was, my Traeger changed my life. And I remember looking up from my notepad as I'm copiously taking notes. I said, can you say that again? Did you just say that your Traeger changed your life? How often do you think something like that about any brand? Almost never, right? There are a very limited, we interact with hundreds of brands every day, so many that we don't really take time to think about it. And they just fill a purpose, they're not that meaningful. But when someone says, this thing changed my life, that says a lot. So Joe Traeger built an amazing product. Why 26 years later had I never heard of it? And why had none of you? And you guys come from all over the country. And so you were, when Joe Traeger built this, well, not many of you were born when Joe Traeger built this. However, you grew up in homes of families that could have had a Traeger on your back patio. Such a meaningful product never went anywhere. Why? The Pacific Northwest, we bought the business, and based on people saying, my Traeger changed my life, I had a really big vision for this business. It was not it was not a niche category. It was not just going to compete with billion, $2 billion businesses like Weber. It is going to dominate the world of outdoor cooking. And so starting with a vision is important, starting with product is important, but your enabler is your people, your culture, the people you hire, how you motivate and inspire them. That is ultimately the greatest enabler of your success. So I invested in January, started running the business, and this was the biggest disaster of my life. I mean, I cannot tell you just what a train wreck this business was. And it's interesting, when you're an entrepreneur, I spent most of my time building things from the ground up. When you go into a business that's nearly 30 years old, you just find bodies buried all over the business that you could not have anticipated. I'll tell you a little about that story. So, first of all, I would tell you about my first experience at a trade show. I joined in January. 3 weeks later, I flew to Houston, and I began to talk to customers. It was an ACE trade show, a whole bunch of mom and pop retailers. They were hand to mouth. If anyone here has operated inside of a specialty retail environment, the brands and the products that sell into that retailer are very important because people eat. They make a living based on those brands. Well, I walked in, and I will tell you 2 hours later, I had a bruise in the middle of my chest from customers poking me and saying, I can't believe, and there was this long litany of things that we had done that was just so offensive to our consumers, to our customers, to our retail customers. Our end consumers loved us, our retail partners hated us. And 2 hours into that, I stepped out and I called the majority owner of Traeger and I said, hey Keith, we have an issue. Do you know what our customers are saying about us? And I kind of walked through it, and his response was, Jeremy, don't listen to these whiny customers. And I said, oh boy, you and I see the world very, very differently. And Keith is a super interesting entrepreneur. He bought a bank when he was 18 years old. How many here bought a bank when they were 18 years old? Just by show of hands. Two in the back. Okay, that's cool. I just made that up. No, don't feel bad if you're not the two that raised their hands. So he bought a bank at 18. He formed the first real estate investment trust. He was on the Forbes 30 under 30 wealthiest people in the country. Went to Hollywood, produced a bunch of movies like Terminator and Fugitive, and it's like some really great 80s classics that you should watch on Netflix someday. Fugitive, rated R. Nope, don't watch it. And then he founded a company called Planet Hollywood. And so a really interesting guy. But we saw the world so differently. And what I quickly learned is like this cultural issue that existed in the business started at the top. Back to your early comment. We had a leader at the top that culturally and from a people, from a values perspective, saw the world very, very differently than I did. I use the word toxic. I don't know if you've ever been around someone, another human being who just seems toxic, or in an environment that feels toxic. It's just like, it makes you feel terrible. It doesn't motivate you to do anything good. And that's how I felt in this place. There we go. Oh.
There, it should work now.
There we go. So there was this mismatch. People would show up to the office and there was no aspiration to build. Because the environment was so toxic, people didn't want to share data. They just wanted to do their job, come in and leave without being noticed. They didn't want to collaborate. They didn't want to take risks. They didn't want to innovate because they knew up top, all the way up, they would be punished for doing all those things. People didn't want to work together. I would call my CFO and say, hey, Paul, I'm going to be in town next week. I'd love to spend some time together. And I remember his response one time, which is, Jeremy, I'm really busy next week. I'm thinking, this is so strange. I'm the CEO of this company, and I'm struggling to get my CFO to spend time with me. And I said, name the time, anytime, early, late. And he said, well, I've got 30 minutes from 7:30 to 8 on Wednesday morning. I said, I'll take it. It was an environment that really had no chance of building something great because no one great was going to stay in this business. There was no reason to stay if you were great. It was a job, and people wanted to be in, they wanted to be out. There was no building or discovery process. Well, this represents, this is just a picture, and I have this picture framed. Someone gave it to me as a gift. It's not the most beautiful picture in the world, but it represents something very important in my career. There were a lot of strategic and operational issues to fix above and beyond the culture. One of them is that we owned our own warehouses and we operated our own supply chain. And for anyone that has taken an operations class, it's really hard to scale when you own all your own infrastructure. Your ability to have variable costs and variable expansion opportunity, whether you're growing seasonally, you're declining, if you're a seasonal business, if you're a growing business, having optionality around your supply chain is super important. Well, we owned our own warehouses, we had forklifts, we had 18-wheel rigs, we had drivers on salary, a very sort of 1980s-esque supply chain. And there was no way we were going to grow this business with that. So we stood in front of our warehouse team and we said, for the following strategic reasons, we have to outsource our warehousing and fulfillment. This just isn't going to work. But we want to be very respectful in how you're treated professionally. So we had a whole bunch of people that worked there. You've got 8 weeks to figure out what's next. At the end of 8 weeks, we'll pay you severance. You can leave at any point in time to go and interview for someone else. On the clock, we'll pay you. And by the way, you're also welcome to be employed by UPS, who is going to be our new partner. And you don't get real feedback in moments like that. The next time I went to the office with my executive team, we pulled up about 7:30 in the morning, and we had some guests. We had fire trucks and policemen in the parking lot. And this truck was on fire. And it had been doused with fuel and effectively melted to the ground. And so in our effort to be respectful and to pivot strategically, that apparently was not okay with someone or some number of people from the warehouse crew, because this was an incident of arson. And it was a little uncomfortable. There really, if you've been through Harvard Business Review case studies, there isn't a case study about when someone burns your truck down. And I will tell you, as an entrepreneur, some of these things you got to learn. I mean, you can't. There's not a theory behind everything. There are principles, but you kind of have to figure the application out on your own. And I remember huddling with my team that morning after we'd gone through sort of the paperwork and just saying, guys, what do we do? And in this process, couple of other fun facts happened. One is someone says that the fulfillment center in Atlanta, UPS fulfillment center, had someone come in who was fired the day before, shot 3 people, and then someone a few minutes later sticks their head in the door, someone from the Wilsonville team, and says, hey, the buzz is that something big is going down this morning. And they said, this is great. So problem number 2, the case studies didn't tell you what to do when your life feels threatened. And this was a low point of my career. I remember going into the restroom, washing my hands. I'm trying to absorb everything that's going on. And I'm looking in the mirror saying, what in the world am I doing here? My Subaru's paid off. I don't need this job to pay the bills. I do it because I love it. And I was not only waking up every morning feeling depressed about where I went to work, but now I felt unsafe. And I brought 4 people with me from Skullcandy who also felt unsafe. And I had this deep moment of introspection where I said, okay, first of all, if you don't figure this out and really step out and become a leader, if you show fear, what is everyone else going to, who's in charge? Like what is your team going to think if you don't have the confidence to lead them through this? So number one is I had to be a leader. And if there was any opportunity to sort of just escape and be done with this business for everything that I invested in it financially, I would have been done. But I couldn't do that. The second was there were some strategic decisions that I had to make. The problem was not that our strategy was broken. That was a problem. And it wasn't that operationally we were just totally dysfunctional. The problem is that we had a toxic culture and we had people that were never going to change. This is, for me, this is 8 months on the job. Maybe it's 10 months on the job. And in that moment I said, how do you change this? How do you fix it? We got to leave. We've got to pick up and we've got to move this business. And those that want to play ball, that want to be a part of something great, that want to build something great together, and they can really embrace these new cultural values, I want them to join us. Those that are not willing to do that, we're done. And so over the course of the next 12 to 18 months, we picked up from Oregon and we moved to Utah. And I was already living in Sugar House in Salt Lake. I was commuting back and forth. We had a small office in Springville. And we shut the office down. And we brought less than 5 people out of 140 because there was no way we were going to build something special with a culture of people that if they weren't burning trucks down, they wanted to burn our trucks down. It was a tough place. And I appreciate the people that joined us. The handful of people that joined us have been great. So here's what I did. I needed to figure out how to align the vision that I had for the business with the cultural values of the people so that the people could take us to realize the vision. And I started with a whole bunch of different things on here. I had a list of about 25, and I spent a lot of time sitting with the company, interviewing them, doing surveys, trying to figure out what was meaningful to people. And eventually I decided that as a CEO, as much as I would love to believe that culturally people follow leaders, the reality is that there are some people that are moldable, but most of us are who we are. And so as opposed to teaching these 140 people new values, what I believed is that I had to screen for the right values. And so when I interviewed people, after developing these 5 really, really important cultural values in the business, I would make sure that they already believed in these things. So they're all Traegerized. I think if you went through it, you would find that none of them are incredibly innovative, but the collection of these values relative to who we wanted to become as a business are really important. So for example, done, done, done. I am a big believer that companies that only talk about providing great service to their customers die. It's really easy to say you're going to service your customers well. It's another thing to say that anytime we hand something off in our business, anything to anyone, it is like to the umpteenth degree, it is high quality. When you're doing a homework assignment, you know where you can cut the corners. You know the details are sort of like, the details need to be there, but they're not life-changing. In a business, the details are life-changing. So value number 1, done, 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 is a really important one for us. I got that from a really close mentor of mine. He sits on our board now. His name is Wayne Marino. Wayne was the number 2 guy at Under Armour, really built it from $50 million to $2 billion under Kevin Plank. He was a CFO, COO, and this is something that Wayne believed in. And he'll ask you, if you ever give something to Wayne, he'll say, how is it? And you know what it means, how is it? And he'll say, well, is it done or is it done, done, done? And every once in a while you say, let me take that back. Let me work on that a little bit more. Wayne has a high expectation for what you hand off to anyone, not just a board member. Yeah, when I was trying to figure out if Traeger was right for me, I called Wayne. And I said, hey, Wayne, I need to spend some time with you. And he said, no problem. He lives in Incline Village up in Tahoe. Come up, we'll go mountain bike riding for a couple of days. So I go up there, and Wayne greets me right outside of security. Could have waited on the curb. Could have said, meet me curbside. Meets me at security, grabs my bag, wheels it to the car. I get to the car is pristine. Like, this thing has clearly been detailed inside and out. For me. We sit in the car and Wayne says, okay, here's what I'm thinking about in terms of the agenda. He's got the next 36 hours nicely laid out. He reaches into the back seat and he grabs a little cooler and he said, hey, I brought a few of your favorite drinks. And by the way, they were my favorite drinks. Wayne knew. He said, I also brought a couple of protein bars. I know you're on this sort of high protein, low carb. And they're like, down to the detail, Wayne delivered the greatest experience. And he wasn't doing it to teach me a lesson. That's just how Wayne operates. Done, done, done is an important value of ours. It's more important, though, that our people live it. And I remember early on, after forming this value, we were cooking. Our chef gets his thing set up by 12:15. And someone who's not more senior than him says, hey, it's supposed to be set up at noon. Like, the crowd was coming through at noon. You get it set up till 12:15. So done, dude, done, right? And he said, you're right. I'll be on time. No defensiveness. When you watch your own people enforce the cultural values, and it's not from the top down, but everyone else believes that everyone should live the values, that's when people start making the right decisions in the business. I'll give you another example. No reservations. So we obsess over our customers. That is really important to us. And it says, we have no reservations about what it takes to serve others, to serve happiness to our customers, both retailers and end consumers. We entitle our people to push any boundary to create a positive experience for every last customer. About 6 months ago, now it's probably been a little bit more, actually someone who's currently in the MBA program here who works for us, he got a call on a Friday evening from a customer who happened to work for Costco up in Seattle. And he said, I'm cooking for a bunch of people tomorrow. My grill's not working. It's after hours. What do you recommend? And there are all sorts of things that this guy could have done, that Rob could have done. He could have said, call me back in the morning. Let me see if I can find a dealer in your area that has the part. He could have said, dude, I'm so sorry. I just had a kid 8 weeks ago. I can't really deal with this. Let me find someone to call you. There were any number of acceptable, under most companies' construct, of things that he could have done. It's not what Rob did. Rob actually, unbeknownst to anyone and without asking anyone permission, because this word entitled is really important, he was empowered. He was entitled to go out and do this. He bought an airplane ticket. At the time, he was a reasonably junior guy in the business, not any longer. Gets on an airplane the next morning, takes apart, flies up there, fixes the grill, helps him cook, party gets started, this guy gets on a plane and comes home. Doesn't tell anyone about it. He didn't ask permission to buy a plane ticket. We weren't exactly making a lot of money then. By Monday midday, somehow this went from the guy at Costco to our head of sales, back to me and the company. And what I realized is that this guy believed enough in our values that no one had to stand over his shoulders and tell him what to do or give him permission to service the customer, because this is what we do. Values do a few really important things in a business. Number one, it tells you how to behave. It tells people, this is how you scale a business. No one has to ask permission to live cultural values. The second is it tells you who to hire. If you hire people that believe in your values, they're going to succeed. And third, it helps motivate your people. Again, back to this culture where you showed up bored to the office. Great people are attracted to great cultural values because great cultural values allow people to be their best self. Look for those things. When you're looking at your first opportunity, look for a place that has great values. There's nothing that Wayne would say at Under Armour that I thought was really cool. He would say, "We have not yet built our defining product." Can you imagine being in a consumer product company where you say, "Do you remember that product that we built 10 years ago? How good was that?" It's like if you define yourself by what's in the past, you're dead. The world is too competitive. I like to think about this in terms of my career as an entrepreneur as well. And it's not just about careers. If your expectation of yourself is not that you have not yet defined greatness as a friend, as a father, as a husband, as an entrepreneur, as whatever it may be, if the best is behind you, what inspires you going forward? So saying we have not had our defining experience, we have not built our defining product, is a really important cultural perspective because companies that believe this continue to innovate. So here are a few things that I learned in the process. 2 minutes?
3 minutes, yeah.
3 minutes. Number one, you always do the right thing for the business long term. It was hard to shut down a headquarter office and say goodbye to 137 families. It was a hard thing to do. That was not the best thing to do in the short term, but it was the right thing to do in the long term. We took a business that was sort of flat to slightly growing, and we built a business doing $300 million in revenue because we made deep investments that were important to the business. Always do the right thing for the companies that you build. The second is getting aligned with your board and with your team, your management team, your people is everything. If you walk into a place and everybody sees the world differently, and there's not a North Star that defines where everyone is going, it's complicated. When you become an entrepreneur, focus on vision and team and culture. When you become an employee, when you go find a place to work, you want to walk into a place that has leadership that inspires you around vision, people, and culture. And lastly, and this is, I had mentioned this, not lastly, I've got, people don't change. That is a cynical view from a business perspective. There are certain things that we change in our lives, but if you really think back to 10 or 15 years ago, although we articulate our thoughts differently, who we are tends to be the same. We evolve slowly over time. In a company, you don't have time for people to evolve. So find people that fit your cultural mix. Be someone that connects to another culture. That is how you succeed as an individual. And lastly, as a manager, as a person, culture and people, by far the most satisfying part of your career. It's not the money, it's not the shareholder value, it's not even the product that you build. It's watching the people, it's being an enabler and watching the people around you do great things. That's it. I wish you guys the best. I know for those that come upstairs, I'd be glad to take questions. You're in an exciting moment in your careers, in your education. I hope you have a ton of success and satisfaction. Wish you the best.